Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special tournament review here at PMTT. You will notice my guest is Scott. Scott, how you going tonight?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. How are you going?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. Now, the reason Scott is a bit of a special guest is because he has featured before on this channel. Most notably, when he won the Gauntlet 2022 and was crowned the champion. Um, Unfortunately for everyone else, he has done a repeat performance and he has been crowned the champion for 2024 again. So, congratulations, Scott. It is a huge
Thank you.
achievement. Obviously, there is just something very special about bald and bearded men that gives you your secret abilities.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. It's like as soon as you shave it off, just all the concentration goes into the game.
Yep. Yeah, very nice. Um,
Yep.
so Scott triumphed at the most recent finals event. So we had 8 of the top players throughout the Gauntlet Series. The other two people on the podium were Nathan Mayer in third place with his Stormcast, and then Aaron Gensch with his OBR came second. So fantastic showing from all of them. This finals was incredibly competitive. There was kind of no weak links. Everyone, the player list was absolutely stacked, and everyone brought an absolutely cooked list. Scott, as a player, how did you feel going into the event? Kind of before lists up, you could see who else was going. What were your thoughts?
Um, well, honestly, I hated it just because like I was going into Chase. We knew who we were going into round one, and it was Chase, and I love the guy, but I've never played him. And he was playing Corn, which I had played all of one game, maybe this edition against. So it was a new player who's practicing for Worlds. It's a army I haven't had much practice against. It was the worst matchup I could have got going in because like I pretty much knew everyone else and their armies. But at the same time, it was one I wanted because I had one gauntlet and I wanted to complete the set. So I knew I wanted to go into this one and win it.
Very, very, very true, very true. One other thing that you forgot to mention about Chase is he is also bald and bearded, so you didn't
Yeah,
even have your secret advantage.
I know. And he's more beautiful than I am. So like, it was an uphill fight the entire way. And the thing
Definitely don't
about
sell
Chase
yourself
is
short on that.
the thing about Chase as well is I know that guy was probably like he played Zinch a lot. He knew exactly what my list did. I read about his list the night before and what it would do. And I just knew that he would be playing that game in his head over and over as we went into it. So he knew exactly what he was going to do. And I had to basically just play around that and try and play my own game.
Very much kind of not let him get too much of a tempo advantage with dictating where things are going down, and still trying to stick to your plan and pulling that off.
Yeah, and like again, it's a big thing that if you've never played someone before, you don't know how good are they. I based on their reputation, or where they come in tournaments, you can get a good feel. But until you're across the table from that person, you have no idea like what sort of game it's going to be, how tight, how clean is it going to be, and yeah, it was nerve-wracking going into it because yeah, I just had no idea what I was up against,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah. But one thing that you did know was the army that you were taking. So if you can give the listeners a quick crash course through it and why you chose the things and played the things that you did.
Yeah, sure. So people that know me know I'm a bit of a meta chaser. So I've been playing Lumineth and Zenith recently. They're both very high up on the stats at the moment. They're two very strong armies, so it was between those two for me. I've been playing Lumineth a lot recently, but I found with Lumineth I couldn't control the pace of the game as much as I could if I was playing Zinch. And in this edition, if you can take control of the pace and you can play your own game and score tactics easily, and more importantly, stop your opponent scoring tactics, That's huge. And Zinch excels at that. Like having a hero phase teleport that you can do outside of your turn is massive. It stops so many tactics and it makes your opponent think more about what tactic they're going to pick. Because if they say, "Oh, I'm going to destroy that unit," and then you just go, "Cool, that unit's out of there," and
Mm,
especially with Zinch, because Zinch have fate dice, so they can almost guarantee that they're going to deny you that tactic.
mm,
So that was the idea when I was building this list, was that I wanted to build a list that would put out the damage, obviously, but also would get in my opponent's heads so that when they were deciding their battle tactic, they might make a mistake or they might forget that, I do have a teleport or I can stop them from doing something.
mm,
Like, and Zinch is very strong at that. So for my list, I took the Weird Flame Host, which, unless you're running the Zangor list, is pretty much the one you will always see. Setting things on fire, making them -1 to wound is huge. Stopping healing is massive. Like, so setting things on fire, keeping them on fire, -1 to wound, that damage output that they have just dropped.
mm.
Obviously, there's Kairos in the list. You just can't leave home without him, I believe. Just he's got the strongest ability in the game,
Mm,
and I will die on that hill because it's the only ability on the game where it directly affects points.
mm. Yep.
So I can pick the same battle tactic twice, which is ridiculous because if I teleport something and hold a terrain piece in your territory that you're nowhere near, then I'm just going to do that twice,
Mm,
and that's an extra 4 points for no extra work, which is huge. And he's under 500 points, so why wouldn't you?
yeah.
Like, he's so strong.
He is
And
probably one
then
of
yeah,
the biggest auto includes in the game at the moment.
like I say, it's very hard to leave home without him just because of that ability, and you combine that with his spell, which again is probably if not at least one of the top three strongest spells in the game, where he can just turn off commands.
Mm,
And you might not think that's strong, but then you remember you can't redeploy, you can't counterspell, you can't covering fire, you can't countercharge. Like I get to do just dictate what I do with that unit now
mm,
that I've just turned off what it can any reaction that it can do. So if I want to kill something, I can just keep it in place, stop it from redeploying, and just annihilate it.
mm,
And he is such a strong piece. And because he's 16 wounds on a 5-up save with a 5-up ward save, your opponent's got to put a good concentration of damage into him to get rid of him.
mm.
And there's been plenty of times when people have tried to alpha him and he's lived, and that's just spelled doom for them.
Yep.
Coming along with Kairos is a Lord of Change. Again, it's very close to an auto include in most Zinch lists because you just get to bring back half units with probably some of the best recursion in the game because I just get rid of a fate dice. So those ones and twos that I rolled on my fate dice at the beginning of the game, I just get rid of one of those ones and I've got 10 blues back or I've got three flamers back. Like
Mm,
it's it's ridiculous. It's so strong. And then again, he's not bad in combat. Like he's got three attack profiles. One of those is Ren 2, 3 damage. You only have to get a little lucky on the dice, and all of a sudden he will chop through stuff. And giving him the so I gave him Illusionist, so he's an extra -1 to hit. Now a lot of change has a built-in -1 to hit for all demons wholly within 12. So you give him the Illusionist, and now he's -2 to hit. Now, yes, you can't stack that, but it means if your opponent tries to all-out attack, it means nothing.
mm.
Like they're still -1 to hit.
It's another aspect
And
of just the control of the list.
yeah, and I took the 9/9 tome on him as well, which gives him an extra +1 to cast and +1 to banish. It's a nice little extra. Honestly, looking back, I probably would have preferred to take the sword that sets them on fire, but I just felt like knowing the people that were going, there might be a lot of magic involved, and I'd rather almost guarantee to get my spells off
Mm.
rather than struggle and stop. Because if you don't get your spells off in Zinch, it's bad news.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Running along with those, I had a change caster. I like the change caster because he offers a couple of things. So he offers an extra 3 dice when you're trying to rally. Now, this is huge when your blues start getting turned into brims, because if you rally, you bring back blues.
Mm.
Or if someone does hurt Kairos or does hurt the Lord of Change, all of a sudden I'm rolling 9 dice and every 4 of his healing wound.
Mm.
Like those extra wounds, they go a long way. He also, if things are on fire near him, if they have the burning keyword, my units get +1 to hit against them in combat. So all of a sudden, that Lord of Change is now hitting on twos and threes, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's more important when you go with a unit of blues, because blues can have 40 odd attacks, if not more, if there are brims in there as well.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden they're hitting on threes instead of fours, which is pretty strong. And
Yep.
then if you also make the blues the honor guard unit, which I normally do, and give them +1 to rend against whatever's across the table, all of a sudden you've got 40 attacks that are threes, fours, rend one damage. But you just don't expect that to come out of the blues because the blues are just an anvil unit
Mm.
normally. So it's really strong to have him in the list. There is an argument to be made for the changeling instead. I just find that there's too many resources going into using the changeling.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Then it's your obligatory 20 blues. Usually run 10 pinks, 3 screamers, and 2 units of 6 flamers. And then the other auto include unit is the spawn. Because again, the spawn is such a good way of shutting down the battle tactic. If you can just turn something into a spawn, you can stop half an army from moving
Mm.
or doing what it wants to at least. So I've done this in many games where I've turned something in a screening unit into a spawn, and then I've managed to tag a massive block of missile troops behind.
Mm.
All of a sudden, those missile troops can't really do much,
Yeah. Yeah. Once again.
especially if they don't have shooting combat. Then it's huge.
Yeah. And even if they do have
And
shooting
then yeah, the
combat, they
flamers
have
are
to
just
shoot the spawn.
exactly. And then if you kill him, I get to bring him back.
Mm.
So it's a win-win.
Yeah.
He's not in the general's regiment, so there's no worry there of him getting giving away a battle tactic, which is nice. And then yeah, those flamers, their damage is ridiculous.
Mm.
Like if they're hitting on twos and you're on fire and they +1 to wound against anything that's on fire and they're wounding on threes, rend one against infantry, and then the kicker is just the D3 damage.
Mm. Oh, it only takes a couple
And
of hits to get through, and suddenly you've just cranked it.
oh, it's huge, it's massive, and especially when I'm turning off commands as well. So if I use Kairos to turn off commands and you call all our defense, if you were on a 3-up save, you're not getting to that 2-up save. Now that
Mm.
might not sound like much, but it's it's a lot of damage. Like I only need you to roll, say, out of say 15, say I get 15 hits through or whatever, and then you've got to roll all those saves. Say you roll 5 2s, 5 1s and twos,
Mm.
then on average it's 10 damage. Like, and you're on fire. Yeah, so yeah, it's such a strong list, and it's just all about keeping control, playing for the double if you can. because I find with most doubles with this list, you have the damage output to just put your opponent in such a crippled position they struggle to come back.
Yeah, and with Kairos being able to double up on easy battle tactics later, you can afford to drop one because you know you're going to get the other four.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure I dropped a single battle tactic um over the weekend. Like they're just that strong.
So that's your list. We know you were not nervous. I wouldn't say nervous or anxious about Chase.
Yeah,
Cautiously optimistic, I think, would probably be the best way to describe it. Um,
yeah,
he was playing Corn, Zinch's
he was.
one of Zinch's arch enemies. How did that
Hmm.
game go down?
It was beautiful. Like it was such a beautiful game. He was like to begin with, let's start with Chase. Chase was fantastic. He was so lovely to play. He played such a clean game, and he caught me out. He caught me out a good couple of times because obviously not playing Corn, I completely forgot about the blood type ability to move into combat. So the
Mm,
amount of times he would auto run and then use blood type ability to get into combat with something. And if he did that to any of my shooting units, that just turns off their shooting.
mm,
And there's nothing I could do about it because I didn't have a chance to redeploy. I didn't have a chance to do anything. Like I had to make sure I was always outside that range, which on most of his stuff is like what, 14 inches?
mm,
Yeah, that's a huge range to be out of everything
yeah,
in his list. So yeah, we started the game. He did make a initial mistake, which he went for seize the flanks. Sorry, take the flanks instead of seize the center. Um, that allowed me to basically use I teleported my flamers across and then used them to deny it, which immediately put him on the back foot.
yep,
But then he spent the entirety of that game just denying me the extra 2 points of more objectives.
mm,
And so he just started catching up 2 points at a time. And until like I think we were neck and neck round three. And then we were neck and neck just until the end, like
mm,
right through until the end. It was such a beautiful game. It was tight. We both like picked each other up on slight things, but like not in a bad way. Just like, oh, just you can't do that because of this, and
mm,
it was like, yeah, that's fine. We were both keeping an eye on the clock, just like playing a very very clean game. And to be honest, I screwed up right at the end. Like I could have got the victory, but it did end on a draw, which really, really threw your whole formula out for a three-win victor. So
yeah.
yeah,
So
it was huge.
so anyone who doesn't know, the Gauntlet Finals is 8 people, 3 rounds. So there will be one undefeated champion. So there is no questions. There's no tiebreakers for first place. And these two guys tying in the first game, I immediately went into a panic. And then when everyone else saw me panicking, they did the maths in their head, and suddenly the entire field opened up with who could win it.
Yeah, it was massive.
Mm,
And there was a lot of speculation before we went into the tournament that whoever won out of me and Chase was likely to be the one who took out the tournament.
mm,
And so we
yes.
drew. So like, it was so it just put me and Chase back on a level footing
Mm,
because then if we both won our next games, it was whoever scored highest
mm,
would take it out. But yeah, like it was such a beautiful game. Like I love those games. I love those games where it's so clean, it's so tidy. He's using all of his abilities. I'm using all of my abilities, and I lost it right at the end because I forgot to move a unit because I was too focused on getting my battle tactic. If I had moved one unit of flamers onto an objective, that would have been my victory by 2 points, but wasn't to be. And I have a habit of doing that sometimes in high pressure situations, but it was still such a good game. I'd happily play him again.
Yeah, and that is a fantastic kind of compliment there, especially playing at such a high and competitive level. Like, this isn't just a friendly game that people are both trying their best. This is with, like you said, you really wanted to complete that matching set, so you were leaving nothing on the table. And I know Chase he put his absolute all into that game. Um, Luckily, and with a bit of planning, we recorded that game as well. So I am very much looking forward to watching it, and hopefully the quality is good enough and I can post it up on YouTube for everyone else to enjoy. But from a TO's perspective, when I was walking around watching, that game was absolutely incredible. There was two expertly, highly skilled opponents, really pushing each other to the limit, and it was fantastic to watch. And the fact that it ended in a draw, even with your mistake, is a testament to both of you at just how hard you pushed each other.
Yeah, and I honestly can't sing Chase's praise. I can't praise him highly enough. Is the word I'm looking to say. Just because he was just like when most people know who I am in the community, uh, in Queensland at least, and they know I'm a good player. So normally when I get an opponent, I usually get one of two things. It's usually someone who's already reserved themselves that this is probably going to be a loss, or I get someone who comes in and they're on their A game
Mm,
and they're playing against me like it's the last game they're ever going to play. And and honestly, it felt like that with Chase. Like the world's team is they'd be silly not to take him, because he's so good and he played so well with an army that is statistically not doing that great right now.
mm,
And it was fantastic. It was so fun.
yeah, and even like, not to keep harping on about your, like, you made the mistake at the end. Um, I honestly believe, like, I was watching the game at that time. Um, I believe that mistake was not caused by Chase, but just the decision fatigue that you both had in that game, where
Yeah,
every single little thing mattered, um, and it caused both of you to make mistakes.
yeah. And also he knew the mistake as well. He saw it and I didn't.
Mm,
And he didn't say a word. And at that level, that's what you want. I
yep,
would have done the same. Like I would not have said a thing,
yep,
especially round five when it's either going to be a draw or a loss based on the words I say. I'll take the draw.
yep, and
Especially when like he still had the chance as well
mm,
to take the victory. Like it came down to a charge at the end that he failed. But yeah, it really came down to the
yeah,
wire, and
yeah.
that's what
One
you want in a game.
Yeah. One last thing that I will say before we move on to the next game is you massively impressed me as soon as you realized you didn't ask for a take back. You didn't say, "Oh, can I?" Nothing like that. You just looked at it and went, "Oh, hell of a game," and then shook his hand. So, like, that
Yeah,
was
I, I,
a
I,
huge testament to
yeah,
your
I,
own morality
mm,
and ethics.
yeah. Thanks. Yeah, yeah. I walked around and hugged him
Mm,
because it was that kind of game, and yeah, we both agreed. Walked up to the table and were like, "Look, no take backs,"
yep.
and we were both in agreement. We both knew the kind of game we were going into, and it was great. It was fantastic, and yeah, I would have never have asked for that take back because I knew it was my mistake.
Yep.
I did it. I did something very similar at Contest of Fools earlier in the year as well. So I've got into a bit of a bad habit of it, and I need to stop.
Yeah, but at least you're owning it. That's the big thing. I know other people in the community would immediately ask for a take back, and the TO would have to be the bad guy in terms of, what did you agree at the start? If you said no take backs, it's no take backs. So,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure we could spend the entire evening talking about that game. But we'll let
We
the
could.
viewers watch it for themselves. I highly recommend you watch it. Will hopefully be going up over the weekend. But moving into game two, so Chase was one of your most stressful matchups of the tournament. Moving into game two, were
Yeah.
you just light and breezy, like I've got through that, didn't lose, let's kick it off, or were you like, okay, that was really close, I need to up my level of intensity again?
I was cooked after that game. I think Chase will agree that after that we were both mentally just like everyone else had finished their games like a bit before us, and so we specifically asked like, look, can we just have 5 minute breather after that game? But yeah, going into the next game, it was Luke Harwood. Love Luke. When I owned the shop down south, Luke was one of my regulars. We played all the time. I could play this guy forever. He's fantastic. He plays a variety of different armies, and he's always a fun game. And yeah, he brought Sylvaneth, which he doesn't really play. I think he's been playing for like 2 weeks. And so I was quite surprised about what I was going up against. And a big advantage for me is my previous like 4 or 5 games leading up to the tournament had all been against Sylvaneth with a variety of different players. So at least I kind of knew what this army did and what he was going to try and do.
Yeah. So how did this game play out?
Um, so Luke won the roll off, and we were both 2 drops, and I was quite surprised because he took first. Um, on shifting objectives is not a bad choice because it means you immediately have the chance to get your 10 points, and it's actually quite hard on shifting to get the full 10 points because you have to hold all of the objectives.
Mm,
But then he failed all of his uh, spells to get his trees out, so there was no teleporting around the board. And then he just absolutely YOLO'd Alariel straight at me. Just came barreling in, trying to kill my Lord of Change, whiffed, and was just left right in the middle of my army. This put me on the back foot because he tied up half of my army with Alariel. So I wasn't able to move forward and get onto objectives. But it wasn't long before I won the double, and I killed Alariel. He failed every fort roll to bring her back, and by the time he did get that fort roll, I had already surrounded all of the trees, so she just wasn't coming back. She had nowhere to go,
yeah.
and everything else was dead. Like so, it was quite a quick game, quite
Mm,
quick fun. It was a fun game. Like
mm,
Luke's always a fun game, but he was very much on the back foot. I think he was quite surprised at the damage output of the Blues, who managed to kill his Kurnoth Greyswords. Just went in with an extra rend against infantry, and yeah, he just couldn't do anything about it. Like just kept tying up his archers, or just putting them in a position where they couldn't do much.
mm,
And yeah, he was just in trouble and
yeah.
just couldn't claw his way back. We both agreed if Lario came back, it might have been a different story, but he just couldn't. He just couldn't roll that four up.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the kind of the things that we kind of that me and Matt speculated in our list review video was that we expected a lot of games to be quite tight, like a draw, or they would be very tight until one player felt they were behind, and then they would go full send on that 20%, 10% chance to table their opponent, because they knew if they played the long game they'd lose. And that's
Yeah,
just part of the skill level of all the players there. Is everyone was very aware at how the games were likely to play out. They could read the board quite well. They knew their opponents. They knew their armies, and so I think Luke having that bad luck at the start with the trees he immediately identified that he doesn't want to try and grind this game out. He doesn't want to let you just slowly grind him down over 5 turns. He'd prefer to go for the big play, get that big attrition advantage, which, if he pulled it off, it probably would have completely changed the game.
Oh, absolutely. If you get rid of the lock turn, the Lord of Change, sorry, turn one, um, no recursion. I have
Mm,
zero recursion. It's what I have on the board, and that's rough. Like that's really rough for a Zinch player if you lose a bit your big, not like because the Lord of Change is the recursion. It's the -1 to hit. It's quite damagey.
mm.
Yeah, if that goes that early, you're in trouble.
Yeah. So like Luke identifying that um, definitely wasn't a case of he went for a risky play because he just figured YOLO, let's send it. After watching the game go, he very much was in the mindset of I'm now behind, even though I've gone first. I haven't had the turn that I've needed that Scott will then counter me with, so I need to send it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I will lose this in I will lose over the next 4 turns. So,
Yeah, I still think he probably could have held back.
mm,
Like as soon as he failed those spells, he could have just spent a bit of, like he could have just pulled back, just sent the Gossamer archers to go grab a couple of objectives. Maybe he loses them, but at least he's not losing Alariel, his Kurnothi, like
yeah,
the big pieces in his army.
mm,
So, and I think he'd agree with that. I think if you would ask him, he'd probably say that
yeah,
looking back, he probably should have had a bit more restraint. But at that kind of level, when you are playing like that, you do make these decisions, and you sometimes you've just got to hope for the best. And yeah, when you know all you've got to do is roll a 4 up to bring Ilariel back, why not just throw her in,
I
see
do
what
the
you can
exact
do?
same thing with my Sylvaneth list. Elariel Belthanos, they get sent top of one because odds are I'm getting them back, and that means I'm playing 300, 500 points up.
Exactly. So it's not a bad choice. I guess he just got a little unlucky with his hits, and yeah, just wasn't able to put the damage out, and then yeah, that just left the Lariel out in the open, ready to be attacked.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, so moving into game three, you got
Mm-hmm.
matched up against Aaron on the top table. Aaron was undefeated at this point with his OBR. How did you feel going into round three, knowing that you had a pretty solid shot at the championship again?
Yeah, so Aaron's list was the other list out of everyone there that I was a little worried about because it's doing the rounds in the scene at the minute, which is the OVR mass cavalry list. Um, and so yeah, I was a little bit apprehensive going into this one, but I also felt quite good about it because OBR are good, but they don't have any long range pressure unless you bring catapults, and he didn't have any.
Mm,
And so I knew, especially when we found out it was Battle for the Path, that I would be able to most likely dictate the pace of this game and how it would go. I did think the roll off at the beginning of the game was going to be big because if he gets a double, it's going to hurt. If I get the double, it's going to hurt the other way. And so luckily I won the roll off, which meant that I dropped first. I decided to go first. I forced him to go first. And because it's Battle for the Path, you don't really have a good option for a first turn battle tactic other than seize the center, which forces your opponent to come up.
mm,
Now, at that point, and Aaron spoke to me about this afterwards, that maybe he shouldn't have done a battle tactic, just decided not to do one because you don't have to do one,
mm,
and just held back a bit more and gave me a double that would have been useless if he'd won the priority, and then he gets to play for the double back, which would have been a good way.
mm,
Also, not to discount, by the way, like I've just mentioned, just before going into this, I love Aaron as well. Like he's a fantastic player. We've only played each other once before, but love playing him. He was so on the clock.
Mm.
Like I didn't even have to touch the clock. He was like, "Are you done? Cool. Clock, clock, clock." And I'm like, "Oh, this is great. I'll play you more often."
One
Like,
thing I noticed is that he was actually moving the clock kind of around the table, but from what I saw,
yeah,
he never made a mistake with spinning it around. He always had it like reaching over, like always hitting the right side. So like it was really good to watch and really good to see players get very comfortable playing on clock, which is something we
yeah.
will talk about later.
No, he was fantastic, and yeah, we brought the clock over because obviously Battle for the Pass is lengthways,
Mm,
and so it being over on my side of the table when I was moving up towards him, um, made no real difference.
mm,
Like, well, it made no point it being over there, so he just brought it over where most of the action was happening, and yeah, it was brilliant. It was fantastic, and yeah, unfortunately for him, I got the double from turn one into two. Turn one, I had crippled his big unit of horses. I think I'd got them down to about three or four models left out of the 10. He had a few poor armor saves. And then I got the double. Kairos was in range, so I used turned off his commands on his Morga, and they are infantry, so the Flamers had Rend 1 against them, which puts them back at their normal 4-up save,
mm,
even with the Catacross bubble. And so, like, he just kept failing saves, and they were just getting chipped down, chipped down, chipped down. And I sent in the Lord of Change to go fight them. He went in, did quite a lot of damage, enough that he didn't take enough back. And then I used power through to chip them down even more and get my Lord of Change back behind my own lines, behind 20 blues.
mm-hmm.
And then the art at the point, the Morgas and the horses were on fire, and they had about one wound left each. And so all of a sudden, the unit of 10 horses, the unit of Morgas, reinforced Morgas are gone. He's got a unit of 5 horses at the back of his deployment. He's got a unit of 3 horses fighting the Kronspine, and he's got Catacross.
Yep.
It's like at that point, I think we both knew how it was going to go. Kudos to him uh, as a fantastic player. He just kept going,
Mm,
tried to get as many points as he could, which is always the right play. Try and close that gap. But then I just kept chipping him down
mm,
until he just had Catacross left.
yep.
And at that point, I just kept feeding Catacross or just avoiding him.
Mm,
And yeah, it was a brutal, another quick game, unfortunately. Like,
mm,
but I think no matter what, that game was always going to be a quick game.
yeah.
Either he gets the double and he cripples me so hard, or I get the double and cripple him so hard.
Mm,
And it just went my way. And yeah, it was good. It was really good. I'm
yeah.
not gonna lie, it was nice to have two favorable games, like in like where the luck kind of went in my favor after my round one game. It was, yeah,
I don't know because Chase had a very tight game against Michael in round two that he just lost. Um, and that's it. Like there was 8 players at this event. Every single one of them was a shark. Like talking
yeah,
about it, any one of them could have taken it out, and no one would have been surprised. But Chase going into round three, he just looked spent. He looked like he'd just
yeah,
done 3 days back to back, fighting off everything. And his last game, like even his last game against Dan, he gave it a hell of a game. Um, but just the decision fatigue from what I believe the first game and then solidified in the second was what kind of caused him to just drop down that. So, but yeah, everyone
yeah,
played
absolutely.
amazing games. What were your overall thoughts about the event?
it was fantastic. Like you said, it was eight really good players, like really good players. I've played all of them, I think now. Yeah, yeah. I think Chase was the only one I hadn't actually played. And they're all so good. I mean, let's run through them. You've got Chase, who such a good game. He gave such a good game. Aaron has been top of the scene
Mm.
and for quite a while now. Like he just comes out of nowhere and just brings these lists and just dominates. And it's always great to see. Luke Harwood and Michael, I've watched grow from pretty like they came into it like fresh, and even at the beginning they were pretty middle of the pack players right from the off, and then they've just got better and better and better. Daniel is again another one who has just appeared out of nowhere, and just been getting better and better. And he always wins the sports votes because he's such a lovely player to play against. But yeah, he just crushes you. It's just, it's fantastic. And then, yeah, Nathan Mayer, I've known for a while, and Nathan has like he used to have a reputation as a bit of a bottom table dweller,
Mm.
but now, like, I don't know what he's done, but he's just shifted his gears, and now he plays so well. Like, I
I
played him a few weeks before the tournament, and he just beat me. He just absolutely just, I don't know what happened. Like, it was just like, I don't know what I do against it.
Yeah, I can tell you
Like,
exactly
it
what
was
Nathan's been
fantastic.
doing. He's turned it on. He has.
Mm.
I was talking because I he lives only an hour away, so one of the closer people to me up in Toowoomba. Um, we've been chatting, we've been playing a bit, and he said at the start of fourth edition that he wants to really push himself competitively at the start, to see what he is like actually capable of when he is like really pushing himself, rather than just going, I've got a list, I'll go play some fun games. So, and to see him kind of after 6 months qualify for the Gauntlet finals is a huge achievement. Huge achievement.
Yeah. And then Bill as
Yeah.
well. Like Bill is another one. Again, like I I I met Bill what 6 months ago, maybe a little bit more.
Mm,
I'm not sure. But he's just again really good. Just this KO player who just plays such a tight game. I actually played him the day after the finals, and he beat me. I just told him it was a day late. It was too late at that point. So, like it was a little more like um less of a like competitive game,
mm,
but still, like he beat me. He played a really fun, fantastic game, and yeah, he's another one that's one to watch. Like there's these players, like, and what's nice is most of these players are like new blood that's
mm,
just coming into this scene, and I expect to see some of these players going for masters.
mm,
Like I want to see masters playing like top of the range games, like because they can do it. All of them can do it,
mm. Yeah.
no doubt.
So, talking about the scene, what are your thoughts? Because you won it back in 2022. So, you've been
Yeah,
a high flyer in the Queensland scene for quite a while. Compare the scene back then, and I know we're going back quite a bit. Um,
yeah.
compare the scene to like back then to the scene now. What do you think are some of the biggest changes that have kind of occurred over the last 2 years?
Well, the obvious one is obviously a new edition,
Yep.
um, which is, you know, a massive change, a welcome change for me. I think the newest edition is fantastic. Yes, there are teething problems, but overall, I think it's more positive than negative. Absolutely. I think the biggest change is just the change of the guard. Honestly, like we've lost, well, not lost, but some of the top players from a couple of years ago no longer play AOS or are just taking a break. And so it's allowing this new blood to rise, which is fantastic
Mm,
because yeah, it's it basically created this void where all these new players just rushed up to fill it,
Mm,
and they were all challenging each other and forcing each other to play better. And it'll be nice if some of that old guard eventually come back to see how they compare.
mm,
Like,
yes.
are they just gonna get like? Is it gonna go the complete opposite way? Because there are some fantastic players from a couple of years ago who aren't currently playing. Are they just gonna get caught by surprise when like these newer players just dominate? Because I think they can. I think they can, and the way that some of them have just improved and are just getting better and better and better. It's great. But yeah, no, the scene back then was fantastic. Like it was always fun to play those guys, and I'd always happily play them again. Like Paddy is now going to step up because I've got two gauntlets now, so he's gotta come get the next one. Like what we doing here?
You'll have to have a
um,
grudge match in the fifth one to see
yeah,
who gets the third gauntlet.
yeah,
You might have to make it
absolutely.
a
Because
greave, so you've still got cover all the limbs.
oh yeah, absolutely. Because Paddy was my finalist, my final game of 2022's Gauntlet, and what a game that was! That was
Mm,
a 1 point game. Like I won that game on 1 point, and so there were tight games back then, and there's still tight games going on now. It's great. The game hasn't changed too much. It's changed a lot, which is nice, but like
mm.
it's nice to see how everyone is reacting to that and how they're growing. And I can only see it going up from here.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with a lot of those sentiments, especially the kind of the growth of the community. One kind of big thing that I've noticed over the last, like running the last gauntlet, is that a lot of people are pushing themselves. Like Nathan is a perfect example, just because I know him and I talked to him. Really trying to push themselves to be better players. We did the survey for the Gauntlet series, and about three quarters of the responses were what to the question why were you attending the Gauntlet included the option to I was aiming to get into the finals. So people want to play these high level competitive games, and it's fantastic to see as a TO, but also as a tournament player, knowing that if I go to a tournament, which is unfortunately quite rare because I've run a lot of them, but hopefully that will change next year. There's a lot of things in the works. Um,
Yeah.
but seeing that I know if I go to a tournament in the local area, there's going to be a lot of good people. There's going to be a lot of people who are keen to play really tight, high level competitive games. Um,
Mm.
we enforced clocks at the Gauntlet finals, and not a single person timed out. The only time a clock alarm went off, I raced over there, and they were putting in their scores. Um,
Yeah.
so that to me says that just the overall scene, and we're only dealing with like the very top of it, but the overall scene is very, very interested in playing more competitively and really pushing themselves as players, which is fantastic to see.
Yeah, it is. And clocks are fantastic now. The game just lends itself to clocks. And we've all like not to speak negatively, I don't want to put too much of a negative spin. We've all had that one game where we've played a slow player,
Mm,
and there are a lot more decisions to be made in fourth edition because there's a lot more happening, decisions to be made in your opponent's turn. And
mm.
so being put on clock should be mandatory.
Yep.
Like because it's so time consuming to decide, am I going to covering fire? Am I going to redeploy? Am I going to counter charge? These decisions take time, and
Mm.
so that shouldn't be your opponent's time.
And the other benefit as well with clocks is like when I'm playing and we're running a bit behind, I rush decisions. Like I just go, no, I'm not going to do that, or yes, I'll do this battle tactic, because we're behind and I'm trying to get as far through the game as possible. Um, if you're playing on clocks, it's on your time. You can take 2 or 3 minutes. Like from previous games, I know playing on clock, occasionally, and this goes across other games as well. Occasionally, you can just sit there for 5 minutes and think through what do I need to actually achieve this turn, plan it all out, and then do it. But if you did that and you're not on clock and I'm playing you, you're sitting across the table, you're sitting there tapping your fingers, going, "Come on, do something!" Like we've been sitting here for 5 minutes. Where if it's on
Yeah,
clock, it's just my time. I can sit there for 10, 15 minutes if I wanted to plan out the perfect turn and then roll the first dice and have it be a one and immediately fail. Um,
yeah,
but you can use that time and you don't have and you're not going to feel guilty about it because it's your time to use. And
yeah,
that's kind of one thing that I'm really trying to stress to people who have a negative opinion of clocks is it's not a thing that competitive people do to try and give them another option to win the game. It's a thing that allows you've got an hour and a half or an hour and 20 minutes, however long the rounds are, half of that. You've got that long as your time to play your game. It means that you can play
yeah,
those 5 turn games, those complicated armies, and you don't have to worry about going slow or not finishing. So,
yes. Yeah, it's huge, and it's like I say, it should be mandatory. It keeps the game clean. It stops any, like you said, you don't want to think negatively of your opponent, but we've all had that game where someone is taking 30 minutes for a hero phase, and you're just like, we're gonna run out of time here, like, and it's not my fault. Like, and that's bad. It feels bad, and we don't want feels bad in the community.
mm,
Like, I don't think clocks should be weaponized,
yes,
um, which is the big thing. Like, I think you should be working together in the game to be going, it's on my time, it's on your time.
yes,
Like, make sure you're using the clock correctly, but that you're not just watching, like, your opponent hasn't clicked it over to you, so you're just going to stand there and wait for them to do it.
mm,
That's not the way to use a clock. The way to use the clock is to work together to make sure you both have the same amount of time to make your decisions.
yeah, and it's another element to the game being time that is an equalizer. You both when you like it's the reason we play to a points value. If I showed up with 10,000 points and you showed up with 2,000, I'm relatively confident that I would win, just because I
Yeah,
have 5 times the amount of points. It's the same thing with time. If I showed up and you were only allowed 10 minutes to play and I had an hour, I'm also very confident I would win just because I have more time. Um,
yeah,
and so it's another balancing thing to make sure both players get that opportunity to play their entire game and to play the game at their speed. Some people are slower. They're learning a new list, or they're working, or they're focusing on one particular thing. Playing on a clock gives them the time that they can do that without having to worry that they're wasting time because they can see
yeah,
exactly how long they've got left.
yeah,
Practicing for previous games, I used to literally practice deployment. And I got my deployment. This is for War Machine, where you deployed everything at once. I got my deployment phase down to 45 seconds because I knew exactly where everything was going because I had a plan, and that
yeah,
helped me do better on clock because I spent less time making those decisions that are fairly consistent. It's a different situation in AOS because there is the alternate drops, but going into a game and knowing this unit is odds are is going to be bodyguarding this unit, you don't need to think through that choice. You can just enact it. You can do it. You can play that bit faster.
yeah. No, it's like you said, it's just an equalizer, and I highly encourage him. And yeah, like I played um, Chase with the clock and Aaron with the clock, and it was perfect. Like me and Luke pretty much threw the clock away. We knew we weren't going to need it. Um, um, yeah, it was nice to have that there, just so it felt fair.
Mm. Yeah. One other advantage I will just say to finish the clock discussion is my wife is very appreciative of it if I play on clock because she knows the game's only going to go for 3 hours. And she can get mad at me when
Yeah,
it's 3.5 hours time and I'm not home. So
yeah,
that's just another benefit. Your spouse or partner can keep a better track of you. So they
yeah.
can you don't spend all your time playing war games.
And as a former shop owner, I've had my fair share of 5-hour games, and I can promise you none of them are good.
Yep.
By the time you get to the end of that last hour, you're just like, please just let it end.
Yep. So rather than hear us just waffle on about clocks, we should probably put ourselves on a clock for this conversation. Um,
Yeah,
are there any shout outs? Were there any fantastic opponents over the series? Any regular opponents that helped you set up for success in the finals that you want to call out before we end the video?
just everyone who attended was such a nice person, and like just fantastic players. We've got such a great scene here in Queensland, and it's growing, and we've got these different clubs and groups that are forming, and they're just growing, and it's so great to see. And yeah, like just shout out to the whole scene. The scene's fantastic, and I happily play anyone in it.
Excellent. That is a huge shout out. So I'm going to say absolutely nothing because I cannot follow up from that. So if you have liked this video or you want to see Scott versus Chase from the overhead camera, don't forget to subscribe to the channel or leave a comment and a like for any other information you'd like to know. Otherwise, Scott, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Once again, congratulations for the only two-time champion of the Gauntlet Series. So if
Shouting
anyone
you
wants,
out, Paddy.
he's calling you out. And if anyone
Calling
wants
you
to
out, Paddy.
catch
Let's
him
go.
up, they need to start now. So otherwise, we'll leave it at that. We'll see you next time. Bye.
See you next time.